I was basically dying on the way down from the summit. And I was having breathing issues shortly after coming down a few feet from the top. I passed Vaka Guffinson. I remember giving him a high five. He was climbing without supplementary oxygen. And I think this was probably around 8 o'clock in the morning. And I started to have, I felt like I was choking, or I couldn't get oxygen in and out of my throat. Basically, it was closing in on me because of all that phlegm was drying up. And I panicked. I kind of peeled my oxygen mask off a little bit, was coughing, and I was really scared. And Ed Viesters came up behind me and asked me what was going on, and I kind of told him, and he said, "Hey, I'm going to stick with you. We got to get down this thing," and that kind of calmed me down. And I remember climbing down the southeast ridge down to Camp 4, and it was pretty trying. It's pretty steep, and Guy Cotter was behind me also, and Ed, and they knew I was having difficulties getting down. We got down to Camp 4. Uh, I can't remember the exact time, but it was maybe around noon or so. And I remember sitting down at Camp 4, and one of the Sherpas came over with a cup of tea, and I tried to drink it, and I just couldn't drink it because I couldn't get a full breath, but also my throat was closed up, and I'd spit it out. I remember talking to Ed, and I said, "Ed, I got to continue to go down." And I was pretty frightened at this time, and I took some medicines to help me, and dexamethasone, which is a real powerful steroid, and I cranked up the oxygen. And Ed and I left Camp 4 thinking it was going to be a cruise down to Camp 2, Advanced Base Camp. And anyway, I basically just bonked because I wasn't getting the oxygen. I was exhausted. I had not had any sleep for about a day, and I just climbed Everest. And but anyway, we were coming down Lhotse face, and I was dragging, and Ed was behind me, and I could tell he was frustrated with me. And he was helping me. He's telling me to keep moving. But I felt bad for him because he was trying to get me down. And make a long story short, we didn't make it to Camp 2. We made it to Camp 3 on the Lhotse face and spent the night. And that's kind of when the intensity really picked up. Went into the tent and laid down. It was Ed and I and another Sherpa in there, who we'll talk about later. And I remember laying down and all of a sudden feeling my throat close in. And I looked at Ed and said, "Ed, I'm not going to be able to breathe shortly because of the blockage in my throat." Ed got on the radio to base camp, Howard Donner, the doctor Howard Donner down at base camp. And they were talking, and I started to kind of go into respiratory arrest because my throat had closed up. It was like choking. I was choking. And Ed gave me the Heimlich maneuver. Howard, Dr. Donner said, "Give Carter the Heimlich maneuver." And I remember Ed gave me the Heimlich maneuver. My face was outside the tent. I was on my knees. He was behind me, giving me those thrusts. And one thing I need to say is when Donner told Ed to give me the Heimlich maneuver, I thought of Marta. And my wife's maiden name is Heimlich. And I'd just gotten engaged to get married a few weeks before I left for Everest. We were going to get married in August, so I thought of Marta. That was pretty intense. But Ed gave me the Heimlich maneuver. He gave it to me for 3 to 4 minutes or so, and then I'd be able to breathe again. I'd lay down. Maybe 30 minutes or an hour later, I could feel my throat closing in. He'd do it again. And this would go on until about 1 a.m., on and off. It was very intense, very painful. Also, whenever you give somebody the Heimlich maneuver, you got your bladder right there. It's like milking a cow. And so, my down suit was wet with pee because every time you gave me the Heimlich maneuver, I hadn't peed all day, but it was like, milking me. Pretty intense. So I was getting cold. And about 1 a.m., Ed was giving me the Heimlich maneuver, and he was tired. He was sweating. He was working so hard to keep me alive. And we were also getting ready to possibly do a tracheotomy. Ed had cut a piece of plastic up to make a trach tube, and he was going through all that process. And but during that last session with the Heimlich maneuver, I ended up spitting out this huge, putting my hand in my mouth, and this huge chunk of phlegm came out. And it was big. It was like a big piece of brownie, bloody green. And it's still intense for me to talk about it. My throat always kind of tickles when I talk about it. But I spit that out onto the ground outside, and I was able to start breathing again. And I remember Howard Donner down at base camp talking to Ed on the radio, saying, "What does it look like?" Asking Ed what just happened, and Donner wanted to know what it looked like, and so Ed had to look out. I remember him trying to describe this chunk of phlegm on the ground. But I was scared. I wouldn't have survived without the team helping out. Especially Ed. Sherpas. There was some Guy Cotter was climbing down from Camp 4 to relieve Ed, and there was some guys climbing up from Camp 2. Some Canadians had some albuterol that were bringing that up. So it was a team effort in the mountain to keep me alive. And I broke my number one cardinal sin. My only goal I had was on the climb was not to become a liability. And during this incident, I had become the liability for our climbing team on the mountain. And so that's the story.